What if I told you? You're not too emotional, you're not too intense, and you're definitely not crazy. You just get attached too quickly. And the scary part, it has nothing to do with love. It has everything to do with what you're trying to escape inside yourself. If you've ever met someone, felt a spark, and within days imagined a future, this message is for you. Let's talk about the real reason. We all carry invisible scars from the past, wounds that were never properly addressed, acknowledged, or healed. These unhealed emotional wounds are like cracks in the foundation of who we are. And the interesting or maybe painful part is that we often don't even realize they exist. They don't show up as obvious injuries or broken bones. Instead, they whisper in the corners of our minds, quietly shaping the way we interact with the world, how we perceive love, and most importantly, how we attach to people. Every time someone shows you attention, kindness, or validation, it isn't just a neutral interaction. Your brain, conditioned by those past wounds, reads it as safety, security, or even a sense of being fixed for a moment. And that's why you get attached so quickly, because deep down you are searching for something that should have been given to you years ago, a feeling of being seen, understood, and emotionally nourished. And suddenly, someone gives it, even just temporarily. These wounds often come from the early years of life, when love and care were inconsistent, or from past relationships where emotional neglect or abandonment left invisible marks. If you were made to feel small, unheard, or unwanted, your nervous system learns that connection is scarce, fleeting, and must be held onto at all costs. That means when someone finally shows interest, your brain triggers a sense of urgency and attachment that feels intense, even overwhelming. You don't realize you're not falling in love with them. You're falling in love with the feeling of relief that washes over you when someone finally mirrors back to you the acceptance and care you lacked. It's almost like you're addicted to the momentary comfort, and your heart mistakes it for permanence. The complexity of unhealed wounds is that they are often invisible even to you. You may think your attachment is about compatibility, chemistry, or even desire, but the truth is, your emotional system is replaying a familiar pattern. It recognizes anything that mimics what was missing and clings to it desperately because it has learned to survive that way. These wounds don't only affect romantic relationships, they infiltrate friendships, work dynamics, and even the way you view yourself. Each interaction with someone who shows attention can become a trigger for overattachment because subconsciously your mind is trying to fill what was never given in the first place. One of the biggest reasons you get attached so quickly is because you haven't fully met yourself. When you don't have a clear sense of who you are, what you want, or what you truly need, it becomes almost impossible to differentiate between genuine connection and temporary validation. Lack of self-identity doesn't mean you don't have hobbies, goals, or a routine. It means that deep inside, there's a part of you that hasn't claimed ownership of your own emotions, choices, and desires. When this is missing, anyone who shows interest, compliments you, or simply pays attention feels like a mirror reflecting back something you haven't yet learned to see in yourself. You start depending on them to define your worth, to tell you that you are lovable, interesting, or worthy of care because you haven't built that foundation internally. And that dependency creates a rapid attachment because it feels like someone is finally completing the version of you that you've never fully claimed. When you lack self-identity, your boundaries become blurred. You say yes to things you don't really want, compromise parts of yourself that matter, and adjust your personality to fit someone else's expectations. Every smile, text, or bit of attention is amplified because your sense of self is still under construction, and you're looking outside yourself for affirmation. This is why you can get so swept away by someone who isn't necessarily right for you. Your attachment isn't based on who they are or whether they truly align with your values. It's based on how they make you feel about yourself in that fleeting moment. You start confusing being chosen with being loved, being noticed with being understood, and temporary comfort with permanent safety. The danger of not knowing yourself is that it creates a cycle of overinvestment and dependency. You might invest emotionally before the relationship has even begun, imagining futures that don't exist, or interpreting minimal attention as proof of deep connection. This attachment feels natural because it's filling the emptiness of not knowing who you are outside of the presence of someone else. And until you start to explore your inner world, confront your likes and dislikes, and build confidence in your own identity, you will continue to attach quickly, mistaking external validation for internal completeness. Lack of self identity doesn't just affect the way you attach to people. It shapes the entire way you experience the world. It colors your decisions, your friendships, your career choices, and even how you process failure or rejection. Every attachment becomes a temporary crutch because you are searching for someone to reflect back the parts of you that you haven't yet claimed. One of the silent reasons you get attached so quickly is because of a scarcity mindset in love. When your mind operates from a place of there isn't enough, everything in your romantic life feels urgent, precious, and sometimes even desperate. Scarcity doesn't just show up as fear of being alone, it shows up as an unspoken belief that love, attention, or validation is limited, and if you don't seize it immediately, you'll lose your only chance. This mindset twists your perception of connection. You begin to see every interaction as rare, every compliment as monumental, and every message as proof that someone might stay. The scarcity mentality creates an invisible pressure that makes you cling, overinvest, and overanalyze every small gesture, because in your mind, if you don't act now, it will be gone forever. You don't just attach quickly, you attach with intensity, as if love itself is a finite resource you must grasp before it slips through your fingers. Scarcity in love often originates from past experiences of loss, rejection, or inconsistent affection. Maybe you grew up in an environment where attention had to be earned, or perhaps past relationships left you questioning whether you were ever enough. Whatever the source, the result is the same. Your emotional system learns that connection is fleeting and must be clung to tightly. When someone shows you even a little attention, it triggers the survival part of your brain, telling you that you cannot afford to let them go. That is why you may overtext, overanalyze, or commit too quickly, not because the person is inherently special, but because the idea of losing them feels catastrophic. You begin to prioritize attachment over compatibility, mistaking availability for value and presence for commitment. Scarcity doesn't just distort how you see other people, it distorts how you see yourself. You start seeking external validation to prove that you are lovable, desirable, or worthy of attention, because internally you haven't fully convinced yourself. Every small sign of interest feels like a lifeline, and every hint of distance feels like a threat. You become hyper aware of signals, text response times, and social media interactions, and you mistake those cues for indicators of your value. That is why someone who should be seen as casual or non-committal suddenly feels essential. Your mind interprets their availability as rare, and your heart jumps ahead to attachment before there is a foundation. The scarcity mindset in love is subtle yet powerful. It fuels anxious behaviors, amplifies overthinking, and creates emotional dependence. Instead of seeing relationships as a space to grow, enjoy, and explore, you see them as a limited commodity, a now or never scenario that heightens attachment before trust, intimacy, or understanding has a chance to develop. One of the most overlooked reasons you attach so quickly is trauma bonding, a pattern where emotional intensity, inconsistency, and even chaos start to feel like love. Trauma bonding isn't about chemistry or compatibility, it's about familiarity. If your past relationships or even your early family dynamics involved unpredictability, emotional highs and lows, or neglect followed by attention, your brain learned to associate intensity with connection. That roller coaster of emotion becomes addictive because your nervous system recognizes it as normal, even if it's unhealthy. When someone mirrors that dynamic, hot one moment, distant the next, giving affection and then pulling away, it triggers the same emotional patterns that your mind has been conditioned to crave. You don't attach quickly to the person themselves. You attach to the familiar rhythm of chaos that makes your nervous system feel alive, validated, and somehow understood. Trauma bonding works quietly but powerfully because it hijacks your sense of judgment. The moments of attention feel like reward, and the moments of absence feel like punishment, which paradoxically intensifies the attachment. Your mind starts to focus obsessively on the reward, the attention, the warmth, the affection, and tolerates or rationalizes the punishment, making you hold on even tighter. This pattern explains why you might repeatedly return to someone who isn't good for you, or why you find yourself emotionally entangled with people who are inconsistent or unavailable. It's not just emotional weakness, it's your brain operating on a learned survival mechanism. You have been trained to value connection even when it comes with pain, because at some point that was the closest experience to love you. Had trauma bonding also blurs your perception of love and safety. You begin to mistake intensity for intimacy and chaos for passion. A relationship that should feel stable and nurturing instead feels boring or unexciting, while relationships that trigger anxiety, fear, and emotional volatility feel magnetic. This is why some people consistently attach to partners who are emotionally unavailable, unpredictable, or even hurtful. It's a dynamic that feels familiar, and familiarity is comforting in a strange subconscious way. The highs feel euphoric, and the lows feel like a necessary correction, creating a cycle of emotional dependence that's difficult to break. Understanding trauma bonding is essential because it shifts the blame away from yourself and toward patterns you've internalized. It explains why attachment isn't always about love, attraction, or compatibility. It's about a learned nervous system conditioned to seek emotional intensity even when it's painful and to cling to someone who mirrors that chaos. Another reason you attach so quickly is because of validation addiction, a pattern where your sense of worth becomes dependent on the attention and approval of others. Validation addiction doesn't always look obvious. It doesn't always show up as seeking constant compliments or approval in a dramatic way. Often it's quiet, subtle, and insidious. You may find yourself overanalyzing every text, every reaction, and every small gesture from someone because deep down you've trained your emotional system to equate their attention with self-worth. When someone notices you, listens to you, or praises you, it gives a temporary high, a feeling of significance that you might not be giving yourself. That high feels comforting and addictive because your internal validation is weak, inconsistent, or absent. Your attachment isn't necessarily to the person, it's to the validation they provide and the temporary relief it brings from your own insecurities. Validation addiction often originates from early experiences where approval had to be earned rather than freely given. Maybe your parents, caregivers, or early relationships made affection conditional, rewarding your behavior only when it met expectations. Maybe you were told you weren't enough unless you performed, achieved, or molded yourself into what someone else wanted. That pattern leaves a lasting imprint. Your nervous system learns that acceptance and love are only valuable when they come from external sources. And because of that, when someone gives you attention, your brain floods your system with pleasure signals, creating a sense of attachment that can feel almost involuntary. You cling, overinvest, and idealize the person because their recognition temporarily fills a void that has never been properly acknowledged inside you. Validation addiction also distorts boundaries and self perception. When your worth is tied to someone else's perception of you, it's easy to compromise your needs, desires, and values to maintain their approval. You may ignore red flags, tolerate inconsistency, or overgive emotionally, all in pursuit of that fleeting reassurance. Each smile, text, or acknowledgement becomes a hit of emotional satisfaction, and every perceived withdrawal triggers anxiety and fear. You become attached not because of true compatibility or emotional connection, but because your brain is craving the next dose of validation and you're willing to attach quickly to secure it. Over time, validation addiction can create a cycle where attachment is confused with intimacy. You may feel deeply connected to someone after receiving their attention, only to find yourself spiraling when it diminishes. The addiction feeds the pattern of rapid attachment because the fear of losing that external validation feels like losing your identity, making you hold on harder, invest faster, and attach more intensely than you would if you were grounded in your own self-worth. Fear of abandonment is one of the most powerful forces behind why you attach so quickly, yet it's also one of the most misunderstood. This fear doesn't always look like jealousy or clinginess. It can be subtle, like a constant need for reassurance or an unspoken anxiety that someone might leave before you even fully commit. Deep down, fear of abandonment comes from a belief that love is fragile, fleeting, and that people who matter to you might not stay. It isn't about mistrusting them consciously. It's about a pattern that has been wired into your emotional system over time. When someone shows interest, attention, or affection, it feels urgent to hold on to them because somewhere inside you are convinced that if you let go, you might never get another chance. That urgency drives rapid attachment because your mind equates closeness with safety and any potential loss with existential threat. This fear often originates in early life experiences, moments when care was inconsistent, support was conditional, or important people in your life left physically or emotionally. Perhaps a parent, sibling, or significant figure withdrew at crucial times, creating a sense that love is unpredictable and unreliable. Maybe you were let down repeatedly, taught implicitly that people can't be trusted to stay. As a result, your brain develops a heightened sensitivity to rejection, withdrawal, or perceived neglect. In adult relationships, this sensitivity doesn't disappear. Instead, it manifests as a tendency to attach quickly, overanalyze interactions, or become hypervigilant about cues that someone might leave. Even small signs of distance, a delayed reply, a change in tone, or a quiet evening can trigger anxiety and deepen your attachment because your nervous system is trained to anticipate loss. Fear of abandonment also amplifies emotional dependency. When you are terrified of being left, you prioritize attachment over compatibility, intimacy, or healthy boundaries. You may overgive, overcompromise, or cling to someone who isn't fully invested, mistaking their presence for unconditional safety. The intensity of your attachment isn't necessarily a reflection of love. It's a response to the anxiety that comes from anticipating their absence. The mind and heart work together to convince you that holding on tightly is essential because losing them feels like losing stability, security, and even a sense of self. This fear can also distort how you interpret love and commitment. Every act of attention can feel monumental, and every hint of distance can feel catastrophic. Your attachment grows faster than the actual relationship because the emotional stakes, amplified by fear, feel life or death. It's not just about wanting love. It's about needing it to survive emotionally, and the anxiety of potential abandonment fuels an urgency to attach before the other person has a chance to leave. So, if you've ever wondered why you attach so quickly, now you know it's not because you're too emotional or too needy. It's because of patterns that have been built over time. Unhealed emotional wounds, a lack of self identity, the scarcity mindset in love, trauma bonding, validation addiction, and the fear of abandonment. These are the invisible forces shaping the way your heart responds, making temporary comfort feel like safety and familiarity feel like love. The good news is awareness is the first step. When you recognize these patterns, you begin to separate the person from the feelings they trigger. You begin to realize that attachment isn't always about the other person. It's about what you're seeking to heal, soothe, or complete inside yourself. You start to understand that love isn't a race or a test of survival. It's a choice, and it's meant to feel safe, nurturing, and reciprocal. The journey isn't about rushing to fix yourself or punishing your past. It's about learning to sit with your own presence, to validate yourself, to nurture the parts of you that have been neglected, and to slowly build trust, both with yourself and with the people you choose to let in. The more you invest in your own wholeness, the less you cling, the less you overthink, and the less you rush. Attachment slows when self worth grows. It transforms from fear driven intensity into calm curiosity, from desperation into conscious choice. And that's when love stops being something you chase or depend on and becomes something you experience freely, safely, and fully.